Okay, so today we're going to walk through the basics of open access. But first, I do want to recognize that this is Open Access Week. This week is an opportunity to learn about, share, and inspire participation in open access. And this year's theme is Who Owns Our Knowledge, which encourages us to think about pathways to more equitable knowledge sharing. So here's our roadmap for today. First, we are going to look at some definitions of open access and why open access is important. We'll also address some common misconceptions around open access. And then we're going to jump into kind of the different types of open access. And you might hear me say OA, that's just a short form for that. And then we're going to review some options for publishing your work. And finally, we're going to point you to some resources at ODU and beyond that can help you at every stage of open access. Okay, so we're going to start with what it is and why it's important. So most research is meant to be shared in some way so that others can contribute, collaborate, and build upon. And open access is the free, immediate, and generally digital availability of research. Importantly, open access can provide users with the rights to reuse, adapt, and redistribute the research. Open access can help increase the visibility, discoverability, retrievability of your research, so more people will be able to find and access your research. This can lead to more usage, more impact, and more recognition, which can in turn facilitate more collaboration, contributions, and also an increased trust due to how transparent you're making your research. A wide variety of audiences will be able to read, cite, and use your research if you make it open access. And open access also removes the paywall barriers in the form of individual and subscription costs. So this can benefit people that might not otherwise be able to afford access to the content. Open access also has a potential to positively impact students, faculty, teachers, researchers, practitioners, as well as the general public. So research can be expensive and very time intensive. And open access can also reduce the duplication of research efforts and provide starting points for other researchers to build off. And it can also enhance educational materials. There are still some misconceptions around open access and open access articles in journals. So authors do not always have to pay to publish open access, and there are some options to choose, generally what's called platinum or diamond OA, and we're going to talk more about that in a couple slides. In addition, journals that require payment are not always predatory. Payment for open access in the form of article processing charges or APCs have become a standard practice of many well-known publishers. So Springer Nature, Elsevier, Sage, Wiley, etc. They all offer open access options for publishing. And we're going to go more in depth in APCs as well. It's also not true that open access is inherently low quality and not peer reviewed. Many open access journals do have rigorous peer review processes. However, I want to note that regardless of whether you plan to publish OA, whether you want to pay for it or not, you should always review the journal's policies and procedures for their credibility and quality. And lastly, many advocates of open access understand that some things cannot be made public and they cannot be made open, and there will be legitimate reasons why open access may need to be restricted in some way. Okay, so now we're going to get into the types and definitions, mainly from a publishing perspective. Does anyone have any questions before I move on? Okay. So there are several different types of open access, particularly, as I said, when we're talking about journal articles. We just talked about some things like Diamond OA and APCs. So we're going to look at what those actually mean in practice. So in traditional publishing workflow, researchers generally release a final peer-reviewed paper in a journal, and individuals can either pay to read that paper or libraries can subscribe to platforms that provide users with access to that content. In what's called gold open access, an article becomes openly available immediately upon publication on the publisher's website. And an article processing charge, or APC, is often used to cover the costs. And a Creative Commons license, which we'll go into in a little bit as well, is often used to outline the reuse options of that paper. You may have also heard about hybrid journals. And in these cases, open access options along with regular subscription access are offered for articles within the same journal. So in the gold open access model, rather than users paying for access to the article after it's already been published, either individually, as we said, or through library subscriptions, costs are the responsibility of the author at the time the article is published. So these APCs can range from a few hundred to a few $1,000s. Sometimes there might be some help for these. Institutional grants, consortia can help with these costs. There might be discounts depending on the journal and the researcher situation. But there are critiques about the sustainability of this model in the long term. I want to touch on copyright here just briefly because, at least in the US, as soon as an author or creator fixes a work in a tangible form, copyright applies. So copyright provides authors and creators exclusive rights to their works and allows them to determine how their work is going to be used. But during the more traditional publishing process, authors often sign over their rights to the publisher. When an author publishes open access, it often means that they can retain their copyright and apply a licensing option, such as a Creative Commons. And sometimes you might be required to choose a license. You might only have certain licenses depending on the journal, but applying a license clearly communicates how you want your research to be reused. And I've linked to the About CC licenses here, and I'm going to show that just briefly, hopefully. So there are 6 different license types. And the least restrictive is what's called CC BY, and this enables reusers to distribute, remix, adapt, and build upon the material in any medium or format, so long as attribution is given to the creator. And then the most restrictive license is the CC BY NC/ND. NC stands for non-commercial, and ND stands for non-derivative. So you cannot use it for commercial purposes, you cannot adapt it in any way, and you still have to give attribution. So I've linked that here if you want to read more about those other types as well. Okay, another type of open access is called green OA. And this is when an author archives a version of their article in an online repository. So this method provides access to works that might otherwise be behind a paywall. So for example, an author publishes an article in a journal and the publisher's version is not freely available, but maybe the author could deposit their accepted manuscript in an institutional repository. And the accepted manuscript has been through the peer review process, all revisions have been made, but the article is not formatted to publisher specifications and is not published on their site in the form. So also keep in mind that publishers have different policies around open access, even for versions other than their publisher PDF. Some will allow different versions to be published elsewhere immediately, some only after a time period has passed, and some don't allow it at all. So just make sure you're aware of your journal policies before you self-archive. If you are conducting research that is federally or maybe even privately funded, not only do you need to be aware of your journal policies, but the funder policies as well. So in the US, federal public access policies have seen updates very recently in response to a memorandum that was issued in 2022 by the Office of Science and Technology Policy, and revised agency policies for publications and the underlying data are required to go into effect by this December. So some agencies' policies are currently in effect. Some are in the process of coming into effect. Most of these policies state that research articles and the underlying data must be made publicly available at the time of publication. So previous federal policy stated that articles needed to be available publicly after a year. And that is called an embargo period when you cannot release it publicly for a certain amount of time. And what we just talked about, the green open access, used to be a method that authors could comply with these policies without necessarily paying APC costs. With the new, what we're calling zero embargo, which you have to publish it publicly immediately, some publishers are starting to restrict author rights in regard to their green open access policies as well. So again, just be sure to check both your funder, if that applies, and your journal policies. And I'm just going to go to this really quick. This is Spark has made a really good outline of the requirements. So they have agencies with updated policies in effect that are published but not yet in effect, and then without updated policies. So if you have questions about a specific funder, this is a really good resource to go to. Okay, that was a lot. So I'm going to pause again and see if there are any questions. Before we move on, I just want to give a couple little demonstrations of what this looks like in actuality, but I'll give it just a minute. Okay, so how would we know in practice whether a journal offers, what we just talked about, gold or green open access options? I'm going to use Wiley as an example. That is one of the publishers that Viva has an agreement with that will cover APC costs for some journals. But if you have questions about other publishers or journal policies, don't hesitate to reach out. Different terminology might be used. You might see fully open access or gold. You might see green or self-archiving. You might see article processing charge. You might see article publication charge. So just be aware that what journals use as far as their terminology might be a little bit different. And policies are not always intuitively located. They could be under licensing, open access, affiliated policies. The one policy you're looking at may link out to another policy. So we're just going to look at an example. There we go. Okay, so I'm just on the main Wiley webpage, and if I go to, actually, this looks a little different than what I had, but that's all right. We can go from publish my article, they have published my book. And if we go to, I like to go to the author resources. And then if I go to open access publishing, it brings me to all of their guidelines. It's just pointing me directly to the open access one here. So on this page, I can see that they are going to pay an article processing charge. The article is freely available. You can go to a list of their fully open access journals. They also have their hybrid journals listed. They have their policy around self-archiving. Like I said, it may direct you to other policies within this main one. So just be aware of that. They also have, some of them have, if we scroll down, they have this funder agreements page as well, and they outline how their policies relate to specific funder policies. So some publishers are starting to do that as well for a little bit more guidance. So that was pretty much from like an author's perspective. If I'm going to publish, how do I know what the journal policies are? How do I find them? Where might they be located? If I'm searching for information, how might I know that the article I'm looking at is open access? If that's important, or I need to, we don't have access to something. So often there will be an indication, such as an open access badge, and this looks like a lock that's open, or the work will clearly have a Creative Commons license. So if I go to our libraries page, and in our Monocorn search, I'm just going to search for data literacy. And then we do have some filters over here. So I want articles. And then I also want, I'm going to search for open access just to make it easier right now. So we see this little open access kind of badge. If we go to one of these, we can go get the PDF. If we look at the PDF, let me zoom in a little bit. It should say somewhere on here, Creative Commons attribution license. So you know that it has some sort of Creative Commons license that will outline the reuse capabilities for the user. So I also mentioned what was called Diamond Open Access. It's also known as Platinum Open Access in some cases. This is free for authors to publish and also for readers to access. So these are supported by a variety of models. So, libraries, universities, societies, organizations, volunteers, a lot of them are grassroots. You can search for these in the directory of open access journals, and there's a filter for without fees under there that might help you if you're looking for these specific journals. They are becoming a more common option, and some regions do have more robust Diamond open access options, but a lot of these operate regionally in local languages. They can lack indexing resources and digital infrastructure. And this unfortunately hinders visibility, discoverability, and in some cases, the credibility and sustainability of these types of journals. So there are many ongoing conversations in the scholarly community about how to make this form of open access more sustainable and enduring for the long term. Okay, if you were here for our previous workshop in the series, it did outline some publishing options for OA, and we're going to review a couple of those here. So as we mentioned, regardless of whether you plan to publish open access or pay for open access or not, you should always look at your journal's policies and procedures. Look at, are they credible? What are they good quality? So we have a couple resources here. Think, check, submit, our library guide, CABLs, and journal citation reports. If you'd like a more in-depth demo of these reports, like I said, our second workshop, The Basics of Publishing, went into these a little bit more, and I will link to the library's YouTube channel at the end of this presentation as well. If you do want, or perhaps you need to publish open access, you do have options. If you choose a journal without an APC, you can search for a Diamond open access journal in your discipline. You may also qualify for a waiver through Virginia's Academic Library Consortium, VIVA. They have a lot of APC coverages for different publishers. Just be aware that not all journals will be included, and I'll go into that a little bit more in a minute. You can also post an acceptable version of your article in ODU's institutional repository, ODU Digital Commons. You may also have a subject repository to submit an acceptable version. In some disciplines, preprints are a common way of sharing work prior to the full publication process. And you can also negotiate your rights with a publisher, and Spark does have some additional information on how to do that. Okay, so we do through, like I said, Virginia's Library Consortium, VIVA, they have publisher agreements for APCs through their open access initiatives. It includes Wiley, ACM, ACS. So if you go to this open access initiatives page, it will show you all the agreements, and you can go look at all the information for that particular agreement. You can look at journals ahead of time that are supported by these agreements. So you're not surprised at the end of the publishing process that you might have to pay an APC. Note that not all journals will be part of the agreements. So not just because we have one with Wiley, not all journals will be included in Wiley. It might be a subset of journals. And an ODU author or an author from another Virginia Viva participating institution must be the corresponding author on these. Does anyone have any questions about that? So mainly we've been talking about open access in terms of journal publications, but this open movement encompasses a lot more than just articles. So the open access is connected to open science or open research, open educational resources, and open pedagogy, as well as open data. We will be continuing our conversations this week on Wednesday with what open access means for our data, and on Friday with an introduction to OER and Viva programs. And then we will be posting the recordings of all these workshops, as I said, to our library's YouTube page, which is also linked here. Before we close, I just want to point out a couple additional resources in case you're interested in learning more about open access. There are a lot of initiatives and communities around open access globally. There's Research for Life, as we mentioned, the Directory of Open Access Journals, SPARC, which is the Scholarly Publishing and Academic Resources Coalition, and the Open Access Scholarly Publishing Association. We've also touched on the benefits of open access, but these resources listed here provide some real world success stories around open access. And as we mentioned, it has the potential to positively impact students, faculty, teachers, researchers, practitioners. And many do recognize that it's important to make our research results, data, code, articles openly available. But other aspects need to be open as well for the community to fully participate. And this includes access to hardware and scientific instruments, as well as the digital infrastructure underlying how to actually make all these things public, which is lacking in many parts of the world. And finally, ODU libraries are here for you. So we have subject specialists you can meet with and make an appointment to discuss your research needs. We have librarians that are skilled in OA, data management, citation management. We have our library guide. So if you have questions, please ask. So I know this is a lot to take in, but hopefully we can provide the support that you need for this. Thanks.